Back? Well, that's called premature. That's called throwing to the courtroom when they are still immersed in this break. And we don't have any ability to hear any of the audio unless I reach down here and turn this up. So we're going to turn up this volume box. So when we hear the volume, as you do wherever you may be watching, is when we'll throw back into the courtroom. And it should be momentarily with Mr. Flyman already on the stand.
I was going to follow up with one comment. Is the last decision you typically make as a defense lawyer is whether you put your client on the stand. You may prepare your client fully, but then reach the decision that to either put them on or not put them on, depending upon whether you're dead in the water, whether you absolutely need to, or whether you've got a good argument that the state has simply failed to prove their case against your client.
Well, at this point, Mr. Clegg and Mr. Morgan, seemingly, and this is my non-legal mind speaking, they would not need to put her on the stand from anything that we've heard so far. That may change, but at least on this Monday morning, we haven't heard anything to that yet.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we are in the middle of a break right now, and this is expected to go along all this week and next week. The 13 counts of perjury that stand against Andrea Sneiderman. The murder charges were dropped a couple of Fridays ago, and that surprised some people. But this case, as we have said repeatedly over the course of the last week, is a case of obstruction and perjury, not about murder, yet it sure feels like a murder case. If the only thing missing is the medical evidence, is about the only thing missing from this trial.
Well, there may be a bit of a disconnect for the jury on that right now, because what they're hearing is about a murder trial, but what the charges are is perjury or obstruction. And so it may be a little challenging for them to make a shift later on when we get to the point of closing arguments and instructions to the jury and deliberations, of focusing on whether or not the woman made false statements, whether or not she obstructed the investigation by not giving up the name or identity or suspicion having to do with the shooter. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge for them at the end of refocusing.
What do you think is the most important point at this juncture of this trial? Is it establishing the timeline or the whole issue of infidelity, which remains somewhat ambiguous through all of this?
Well, I think it's the timeline, because the infidelity, first of all, I think that's been established, or it's been established sufficiently that there was some level of a relationship from the testimony that's been given. And that's not so critical as the timeline, because members of the jury themselves may have either had some kind of relationship outside of their marriage, or know of good friends or family members who have done so. That doesn't mean that someone is involved in shooting their spouse. So I think the timeline of when the defendant knew certain things for certain, and then what she said relative to that, to witnesses who come forward and testify about that and who have already done so, is going to be the critical component for them to show that, for the state to show that when she made a statement, it wasn't a mistake, it was a knowing, intentional lie for a purpose.
All right, Tom Beaver, thank you very much. Back into the courtroom. No premature notion here. We're all set to go.
Yes.
And what specifically did you identify, what specifically did you examine as it related to a Blackberry telephone?
I actually reviewed the image of the memory from the Blackberry itself.
And do you recall, or do you know the phone number of the Blackberry that you identified?
I would have, I know it's 404. I don't remember the next three, but I know it's 1931 is, I believe, the last four.
1931 are the last four digits?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
1 second. Let me go off the record for a minute. Brad, would you assist the media person and his assistant so they can do whatever they need to do with the audio? I'm going to resume the trial, but if you have your assistant to work with Brad to get whatever audio signal you need, I will allow that. I'm not going to stop the trial for that. We're back on the record, Kelly. You may continue.
Thank you. Are you approach the witness?
You may.
And Mr. Future, approaching the witness with exhibit number 68.
68.
Ava Fire and I have shown you what has been stipulated and admitted into evidence as State's exhibit number 68. I'm going to ask if you can refer to State's exhibit number 68. 68, specifically the subscriber information in the first few pages, and see if that refreshes your recollection about the phone number of the BlackBerry device that you examined in connection with this case.
Yes, I believe it is listed as 404-374-1931.
All right. And do you know, Agent Fryman, who it is that phone number is what the subscriber information for that phone number is?
It is listed as being belong to Andrea Sneiderman.
Thank you. And Your Honor, just for the record, I will identify that in State's Exhibit number 68, the defendant's phone number is stipulated as having been 404-374-1931.
When you say stipulate, does it say stipulate between you and the defense prior to you joining this issue, or is it something deeper?
Yeah, this is just a stipulation as to the authenticity of State's Exhibit 68.
The records, I mean, you
The
mean,
records themselves.
The records themselves including the subscriber information.
Yes, sir.
and the subscriber information being the telephone number assigned to?
And your time.
All right. That's
Thank
the
you.
stipulation.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
And tell the jurors, please, about the image that you examined in connection with the BlackBerry.
Your Honor,
Go ahead.
they keep jumping up. I'm going to object again. I don't believe that this gentleman ever physically examined the BlackBerry itself. If at anything, he examined an image, and we're not at the point where there's been a proper foundation laid to show the authenticity of what it is that he looked at.
I'm saying response.
Your Honor, I have another witness who will follow this witness who will establish more of the chain of custody, so I can call him out of order if necessary, but for scheduling purposes, I'd ask that the agent be continued to testify, given that my representation that will make up the chain of custody issues.
Well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to over the objection based upon representation that it will be linked up, but if it's not linked up, if I sustain the objection, I may have to strike this testimony.
I
I understand, that's the objection. It's noted. I'm going to let it continue based on that representation. It's going to be linked up going forward.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. So, Agent Fryman, you were telling the jurors about specifically what it was that you examined.
Correct. And I did respond that I looked at the image that was obtained from the actual memory of the phone.
Okay, and what's the difference between the image of the memory of the phone and the actual phone itself?
Nothing in specifics as to the data that is maintained on it.
Let's back up for a second. Tell the jurors in a simple way that I think we'll be able to understand. How is it that you image a device like a BlackBerry? You just crack it open? What do you do?
Okay, so with specifics to this BlackBerry, we were asked to assist in trying to obtain the data on it, and because I'm cell phone certified and have been entered as an expert as well, and all the training, normally, in a normal process, I could have done that myself. In obtaining an image from the beginning to the end, hook it up to a device, there's a lot of commercial products that we vet to ensure that it is correct as well, and industry standard approved tools that do that. And basically, again, as I stated before, creating an image is basically going from the very beginning, from the very first bit or block, if you will, of the device, and going through and replicating it over to an image from the raw data or from the memory itself. Specifically to this, the reason why I was unable to do the imaging part of it or create the image was because this phone was specifically locked with a password. So we had to send it off to our headquarters, which in turn was able to pull the chip or the memory itself and then create the image from there.
Let me ask you, Agent Fryman, did you yourself or at your direction did someone send the physical BlackBerry phone to the other, your colleague, as you described, to image the phone?
Correct.
Okay, and then was that image then sent back and you examined that? Is that what your testimony is?
So what had happened was once the image was completed, a report was created, industry standard report, breaking the phone up into the different categories that normal people would see, call logs and text messages, emails, things of that nature that was able to be pulled from the actual memory. And then when that all was returned, I reviewed it for consistency.
And what was the result of your review for consistency?
First of all, that specific model I looked up just to make sure, but that because every single phone is different,
But that particular model, the exact image size that was created met the image size that would be for that memory that was maintained in that device itself.
Okay.
And there was other items that, go with it, a SIM card that would show to connect to a tower and, things of that nature. There was an SD card or memory, that extra memory for user data that they can put on their own stuff if they want it or whatever. But again, the basic phone out of the box comes with a certain memory, and all the items were imaged and or reviewed at that time.
What kind of information can you typically receive, or what can you typically retrieve from a BlackBerry phone, the physical handset?
Every single phone is different, and BlackBerries are no exception. Again, it depends on the model, the new technology that comes out, things of that nature, what may be the buying plan that an individual has. But in its most basic form, as I stated before, you have the call records, you have text messages, you have emails, notes, calendar information, things like that.
What kind of information can you retrieve from the image of a phone as you've described it being?
You can retrieve the same data.
The exact same information?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. How is the retrievable information that you just described different from the information that's kept by a cell phone provider or a cell phone company?
And again, every cell phone provider is different as well, and phone company. It's based upon the plan, what you have. A lot of individuals just get a bill that says this is what you owe because you have texting capability or you have phone capability only. If you go over your minutes, it's going to be charged a little different. So again, in the context of what the provider gives you and what the phone has in it may be different.
Let's talk about phone logs. What's a phone log as it's used to refer to information that's kept on a cell phone?
In its most simplest forms, a phone log is basically just something for the user to have as a quick reference, to recall a number, maybe they missed a call, or whatever, but it's in its simplest form, it's when the call the date and the time that a call was received, the number. If they're in your contacts, maybe the name comes up rather than the number so that you know who called. The duration of the call, if it was a missed call, incoming or maybe outgoing as well. So it's really just a quick reference for the user in that instance.
Let me say, you said a missed call. Can you describe for the jurors, what do you mean when you talk about a missed call?
A missed call would be that specifically a call that went through that you just maybe didn't get to, maybe it was laying on a table or a desk, or you just couldn't answer it at the time, and it just rang and rang, and then it was just came up as a missed call.
Okay. Does a call have to connect, meaning there has to be someone who answers at the other end of the line?
No, the phone will come up, the number will come up as a missed call. It doesn't have to be answered necessarily.
What about a call that goes to voicemail?
That's a little different because if, for instance, I'm calling you and you happen to be making a call at the very time that I'm calling you, that number could go right to voicemail. So when you get off the phone, it's not listed as a missed call, but all of a sudden you have a voicemail and didn't even know that it came in. So there are things that can affect the appearance of a call that comes in, whether it shows up or not. Mm-hmm. But in most instances, if you miss the call and they do a voicemail, it'll show up in both.
Okay. How large is, and let's start first with a typical phone, how large would a typical cell phone's phone log be?
It depends. It depends on the service provider as far as how much room and memory that they have. I mean, in again, its most basic form, text is very small. It does not take up a lot of room. When a phone is able to send pictures, it's a different type of a message that's sent. If it sends emails or back and forth with emails, now you're taking up more potential of the storage capability. But in the simplest forms of text and such, with missed calls and all, it's just a real simple line. It doesn't take up a lot. So really it's dependent on what the provider or manufacturer even sets.
Okay, how about what specifically was the type of BlackBerry phone that the defendant had in
The model?
The model.
I believe it was the 9700.
Okay. And how large is the call log for a BlackBerry 9700?
I know it's over 100.
Okay, so that
Calls.
means that if I'm understanding you correctly, the 100 last calls that were received prior to the time of your examination would typically show up on the phone log, is that right?
Yeah,
Explain
you mean, would it show up if I had 101 calls, then it would drop one? Well, in this specific model, it's over 100, so I'm not sure where the drop-off would be, specifically to the BlackBerry. I know that for the iPhone specifically, they set the arbitrary number of 100. It doesn't matter, last 100 calls, and then they just roll off. You don't see it as the user, and most cases you don't care about the 100th call, especially if it's a continuous call that you always get, friends or family or whatever.
Okay,
So,
and
but
I'm sorry, and we're talking about calls made, right?
calls incoming, outgoing,
Yeah.
and missed, they're all under the same logging parameters, so 100 total.
Okay,
For the iPhone.
for the iPhone.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
for the BlackBerry in particular, you said at least 100?
I know that there was over 100 reported back, specifically with dates and times and reported durations and things of that nature.
Okay, that was my next question. Did you determine how many calls were in Andrea Sneiderman's BlackBerry call log at the time the image was created?
I would have to look at the report itself to give a definitive answer, but I would, I know it's over 100.
May I push the witness?
You may.
Agent Fryman, I'm handing you what I will mark as State's Exhibit number 72 for identification purposes. For purposes of the record, it's State Stamp page 8957 through 8959. I'm going to ask you just to look at that and see if that will refresh your recollection.
This is a typical laboratory report that is put out, but it doesn't specifically go into the details as to what is contained on there. There was another report that was put out, typically in electronic form, to make it easier to do searches and things of that nature, that would actually have the current number. And again, I know it's over 100 in that specific. This just goes over the different items that when the phone was received from headquarters, they did an inventory of it. They said this is the phone, the SIM card that came, that allows it to connect and authenticate with the service to say this is a proper paid phone, and then an SD card that would house personal information and or applications and things of that nature.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Were you asked to specifically look at whether there were any phone calls, either to or from Hemi Newman on Andrea Sneiderman's BlackBerry at the time it was examined?
At the time that I reviewed the data, yes.
Okay. And were there any calls to or from Hemi Newman reflected in the defendant's call log on her BlackBerry phone?
I believe there was one.
Remember the date when that was?
September, I believe, 30th
Does
of
that
2010, sorry.
Okay. Does that mean, Agent Fryman, that there were no calls between Andrea Sneiderman and Hemi Newman that she placed or received from her BlackBerry phone after September 2010?
No.
Okay, what does that mean?
It just means that they were no longer current in the human readable form of the call history or the call log.
How is it that calls get removed from a phone's call log?
Again, it depends on the manufacturer and what is set up in the specific phone itself. Sometimes they roll out, as I said. The 101st call is gone and the next one is the newest one.
Let me stop you there. Does a rollout always occur in a chronological fashion, meaning the oldest rolls out before the newest?
Yes, but again, with the caveat to that, specifically, I can delete calls in between somewhere in the 50s. It's going to maintain 100, and if I get below 100, it's just going to populate until that 100 comes in there, specifically to the iPhone, if that makes sense. Again, it's wherever you delete it, it's taking it out. If I do nothing and I make a 101st call, the 100th call is now gone. And so it is oldest is out at that point. But if I effectuate that or cause that to be deleted anywhere in there, then it's just going to continue to populate, in order.
Other than those two ways you just described, a call either rolling out as the 101st call or a physical deletion of the call log, is there any other way that a call would be removed from a call log that you can think of?
On the user side,
On the user side.
phones are digital, they're electronic, anything is possible with that, and so they could have an error or whatever on the system with having something get removed. It's electronic.
Is it likely that
No,
there's any other way?
not in this case, no.
How could you find out if calls that didn't appear on the call log had actually been made?
There's two ways specifically that I know of. One is the long, arduous way of going to another person that the contact or the call was through. Check their phone to see if the call is actually present there. The other way is going through the service provider.
Okay, is there any way for a customer to change the cell phone provider's records to delete a call?
Again, it's electronic. Anything is possible because the storage and such, but there are a lot of things that have to occur in order for an individual's phone records to be arbitrarily deleted or removed, specific. Again, prior to working on forensics, one of my jobs in the Bureau was to investigate hackers and virus writers and things like that, a lot of the digital frauds, things like that. And so we read all the time that hackers are synonymous with attacking servers and things like that, but more of, in an entirety of a situation rather than a very small individual incident or individual.
Allowing for the, would you call it likely or unlikely that AT&T's cell phone provider records would be hacked?
Almost 17 years, I've never heard of a specific individual's call records being changed at all.
Okay, so then setting aside the unlikely possibility that the phone records were somehow hacked, when I delete a call from my phone record, from my call record on my phone, does that delete AT&T's record of that call being made?
No,
Okay, that just deletes it where?
on the user end.
Okay. I want to ask you specifically about calls made or received on November 18th, 2010. Did you look for any record of calls between the defendant and Hemi Newman from November 18th, 2010?
Yes.
Okay. Did you look for any calls as it would have been maintained on her phone? Did you see any calls that a record of any calls that the defendant made to Hemi Newman on November 18th, 2010?
No.
Did you see any record on the Blackberry the image of the Blackberry that you analyzed, of Hemi Newman calling the defendant on November 18th, 2010?
No.
The stipulated cell phone provider records, State's Exhibit number 68, indicate that there were 9 calls made from Andrea Sneiderman's phone to Hemi Newman's phone on the morning of November 18th, 2010, between 9:27 and 10:46 a.m. What explanation do you have, if any, for why those calls don't appear on her Blackberry as it was when you examined the image?
Again, there's only 2 ways, specifically in this case, that would have happened in a rollout. And my example of the rollout would be, for the iPhone, and this is a Blackberry, so it's set up differently, or physically deleted.
Do you have an opinion about which one of those scenarios is more likely?
Physically deleted.
Why do you say that?
Because again, looking at the phone records in its entirety of what was recovered on the Blackberry itself, there are calls before and there are calls after and during. So there are calls that are listed during that time period.
Just no calls from Hemi Newman?
Correct.
No calls to Hemi Newman?
Correct.
There were older calls?
There was one, yes ma'am, one.
I think you
That was located.
That was located?
Yes ma'am.
Explain to the jury what's the difference between the raw data on the phone and the data that's visible to a user on the phone.
Easiest way to explain that is that unfortunately cars nowadays are almost all electronic. When we turn on the car, we see the dash, we see the miles, we see the temperature gauge, we see the tire pressure, things like that. The computer itself in the car is interpreting the data and showing it to you in a human readable form so that you understand, oh, my tire's low, or maybe the fuel gauge is low. I need to fill that up. In this instance, it would be taking that data from the vehicle, or in this case the phone, in a raw form. And so the data is there, and part of our job and part of what our specifically headquarters had done in interpreting this is to find those exact markers that represent text messages, the call logs, the emails, things of that nature, and take it from the raw form and put it back into a human readable state for us to review.
All right. I want to direct your attention now, Agent Fryman, to text messages. Can you explain to the jurors what it is, how a text message works?
Text message is just simply data. It's, send and receive. You get a date and time. You get the, whether it was sent and received, the phone number, the contact potentially, and then the content of the actual text itself.
Okay. Is there a difference between the data or the information that the phone itself stores and the information that is typically kept by a cell phone provider like AT&T?
Again, it all depends on the provider themselves. Some are of the bigger companies may be able to maintain certain amount of data for a certain amount of time and are required by law to maintain certain amount of data for a certain amount of time. But as time goes by, and especially what they actually send out in a bill, it's the very basic stuff. So there can be and are differences, but every provider is different as well.
Is it certain that the content of a text message would be kept by a cell phone provider indefinitely?
No.
To your knowledge, is the content of do any providers maintain the content of text messages indefinitely?
Not to my knowledge.
How long does the content of a text remain on the physical handheld device, the Blackberry in this case?
I hate to sound repetitive, but again, it just depends on the device itself. Every phone is different and every storage is different, and it depends on what tool or what application that you may be using. There are other aftermarket tools that you can use to text and communicate as well. So it really depends on that and the storage capability. So as to how long it would be on there, but in this case, it's usually until a user deletes it.
Okay, so let me ask you then, how is it then that the content of a text message would cause or would come to be deleted from a Blackberry telephone, such that you examined in this case?
And again, just to kind of reiterate that point or bring back the iPhone example as well, because we're kind of dealing with that in this case as well, but the iPhone specifically will show you the newest image or messages, and all you have to do is say show more, show older messages, and it'll show you the later ones. So they're not deleted. They appear to be rolled out, but it's really for convenience sake. Again, most of the conversations that happen within the couple of days or whatever are the most important at the time for the user, but they can retrieve older records as well.
Did you say iPhone or did you say Blackberry?
Yeah. In the iPhone, I was using that example as well, just to show the differences, and again that there's differences between specific devices, and specifically for the Blackberry itself, you can absolutely keep it or delete it physically.
Does there come a time when the data on the phone is too much and a text message would get rolled out in the same way that a call log would get rolled out?
It's possible. It just depends on the manufacturer and actually how they set up the software. Again, when you're dealing with phones, especially personal phones, people's contacts are probably the most important. They don't want to lose their contacts. So again, they may have a hierarchical way of saying, look, this is the most important to me. Don't delete the contacts. If I start running out of room, start rolling out this other stuff, maybe they haven't had a conversation with somebody except for once, or these free text messages sometimes you get across there or whatever. Those, are marked as deletion after a while. But again, it depends on the service, but I'm relatively certain and comfortable in saying that, if it comes to a critical point in the data and the storage of that data, that it can be rolled out.
Okay, but only if there was so much other information kept on that phone that there was just no more room to keep the content.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay.
Correct.
All right, so rolled out, and you talked again about physically deleted. What is it to say that a text message, the content is physically deleted?
You would just delete it. You would go through the menu option and say, get rid of this or delete it.
Okay. How many text messages from Hemi Newman to the defendant were you able to retrieve from the date of November 18, 2010?
On the Blackberry?
On the Blackberry.
None.
Were you able to retrieve any other text messages from any other individual to or from Andrea Sneiderman on November 18, 2010?
There were other text messages on that date reported, yes.
But none from Mr. Newman?
No, ma'am.
The stipulated phone records indicate 4 text messages from Hemi Newman to the defendant on November 18, 2010. Were you able to retrieve the content of any of them?
I was not shown any of the text messages, so I did not personally, look for any of that content.
And explain to the jurors what you mean by that. Is this going back to the raw data that you referred to earlier?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, explain what that means, please.
Yes, ma'am. So specifically on this, what I had done was I took the raw data, the image that was provided, and the report, and did a comparative to say, all right, I want to look to see if Hemi Newman's phone number comes up at any time through the raw data to validate as well, just to verify that we're getting everything at least in a reportable form. And what I found on that specifically is that I found the number in its entirety, not just a piece of it, not just an end part that could be a part of something else, but the entirety of his phone number in there 43 times. Looking through the report, there was reported 35 text messages that were found. One time it was located as his contact, so the number was there. One time was the call in September that I had already spoke of, and one was within his email or an email reply from him that was like a signature, so it would have his name and then his phone number in it. That would leave 5 unanswered. And again, to recover what that specifically was, I just know that there was at least 5 times that it was in the phone, but still, but not or no longer in the human readable report side of it. So again, in the context of the text messages or phone calls or emails or others, it could have been any one of those that it had come from, or that number was utilized for.
Okay, and you got to obtain the information about those 43 contacts through the special equipment that was used to retrieve this information, right?
Yeah, in the specific report that was provided by headquarters, there, again, I laid out the numbers minus the 5. The 43 that I had come across just to validate. Again, if I'm looking over it, I'm going to look at a report and make sure that it's accurate in its representation. The 38 total times that it came up, I was able to find those specifically in the report in a recoverable form that would have been in a human readable form for somebody. So the other 5, again, I'm looking at it in the raw data with some forensic tools that would read different coding languages as well to ensure that I was looking at it in an entirety, that we weren't missing something, or that we didn't find something that wasn't reported.
And you were looking for information that would be retrievable for you with your equipment, but that would have been, otherwise had been deleted from the phone.
Correct.
I asked you about the 4 text messages from the defendant, from Hemi Newman to the defendant. Were you able to specifically tie any one of the fragments that you talked about, the fragmentary communication, to a specific time or date on the 18th?
Well, first of all, I didn't specifically say that those 4 were anything that was recovered. Like I said, I covered 5 times, but they could have been any of the text or emails or phone calls. And secondly, I wasn't provided the actual content of the text from provider or other means to be able to search for that text. I searched for a known, which was the entirety of his phone number. So to add to that, I did not look for specifics on dates as well in interpreting it.
Okay. And when you say you could have searched for it if you had the content of the text, does that mean that if you had the content of the text, what the text message said, you could have looked for fragments of it?
Yes.
Okay. But because you didn't have that, you weren't able to do a fragment?
Correct.
Okay. All right. The stipulated phone records, Agent Fryman, also indicate 1 text message from the defendant to Mr. Newman at 10:34 a.m. on November 18, 2010. Were you able to retrieve any part of that text message?
No, ma'am.
None at all? Not even the record that it was sent?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Do you have an opinion about what happened to that message?
Because, again, as I stated before, there were texts before and after during that time period, and that it was consistent, that I believe that it was physically deleted.
Okay. And let me make this point, Agent Fryman, before I forget. Is there any way to determine who deleted the information from the phone?
No.
But based on the information or the technology as it exists today?
Well, again, because this phone had a specific password lock by either the user and or the owner of the phone, then my opinion is it was either deleted by the owner or user of the phone, or someone that individual provided that information to.
Okay. Is there any way to determine when a text message was deleted?
No. Except for from the time it was sent or received until it was seized. So any time in between that it would show that it was deleted, or know that it was deleted sometime between when it was sent or received and when the phone actually was seized.
All right. Thank you, Agent Fryman.
Does that mean no more questions?
That means some more questions?
All right, Mr. Petrie, he's with you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Fryman, what is the default period of retaining messages or phone calls on a Blackberry 9700?
I don't know. I don't own a 9700.
Isn't that kind of important?
Well, again, looking at the data, there are messages all the way back, I believe, to August of that time. So August and, until the following March, I believe. So there was quite a bit of retention on there.
Now, let me ask you this. You're not just telling us that the things that were deleted from the 18th on, correct?
Correct.
There are lots and lots of phone calls, records of phone calls and text messages that you are no longer able to see on the image that you saw, correct?
What I can say is that I never got the phone records, so I don't know specifically how much, but if you're saying that this is what it was, which it looks like it appears to be, then yeah.
Can I approach you on?
You may.
Your Honor, I do not know the court schedule. This may take me a couple minutes to go through these if you want to take a 5-minute break, but I'm going to be plugging right along.
Well, yeah, just plug right along.
Okay.
I just try to give the ladies and gentlemen a comfort break at least once every hour, but...
I just didn't remember when our last one was.
Oh, I do.
Yes, you do.
And if they need one before then, they'll give me
They
a
will let
sign,
you know.
as they normally do. Or some type of motion that they need a comfort break. And as I indicated earlier, if one needs a break, it's okay. And well, we can go off the record for a minute. Kelly, Mr. Committee, cameraman, did your sound get straightened out?
I do, sir. Thank you.
That's want to make sure. All right, we're back on the record, Kelly.
Let me, if you would, just look at this with me, sir. Would you agree with me, if you don't mind standing up, so...
Or you can stand. You can stand, sir, and look.
Yes, sir.
Stand.
But I didn't want to be on camera.
Oh, no.
Okay, got it.
That's just,
Yep.
it's just date.
Yes, sir. Understood. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Would you agree with me that the records here for November the 18th begin with item number 2,780?
That's what it appears, yes.
Okay, and they follow in numerical order, correct? So the
Correct.
bottom of that page is 2794.
Correct.
And then, looks like, let's just go to the end of this page, January the 15th at 3:50 p.m. There's an item which is either a text message or a phone call. Would you agree? That's what the items are. It tells you whether or not they are mobile to mobile, direct, voicemail. Would you agree that these are the records of incoming and outgoing?
This is what it
text?
appears like. I don't know what their standard are as what their reporting is. I'd have to go through it,
Okay.
specifically, but I'll
Would-
agree.
And item 3739 is on January the 15th. Would you agree with that, sir?
That's what it appears to be, yes.
Okay, so between November the 18th and, we got between November the 18th, we start with 2780, and on January the 15th, we have 3739. So we've got just shy of 1,000 entries, items between those dates, correct? So roughly 2 months.
That's what it appears.
Okay. How many total,
He's moving, Mr. Cameraman, so you won't put his image on.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
how many total items, text messages or phone calls did you find records of?
I would have to refer back to the report
Could you do that for us?
if I got a copy of the report.
Okay. He says he doesn't know how many he looked at.
Do you want to give him something to refresh his recollection?
Well, you have no idea, do you?
I don't. Again, I was specifically looking for contact, as I've testified earlier, between Hemi Newman and Andrea Sneiderman.
Okay, but you've testified about the deletions that you believe were operator-created deletions of contacts between Hemi Newman and Andrea Sneiderman, correct?
Yes.
And do you not think it would be important to know in the context of how many other items were deleted from her BlackBerry, in that context, whether or not there's any importance to it? Is that not something that meant anything to you?
Sure. Okay, so the question is whether that's important or not. And again, I was tasked with one specific thing. I am just now seeing this phone records log, and obviously this is more likely than not different than what the actual receiver would get or the billing cycle. They wouldn't get the text messages or anything like that. They would mostly, like I said, get the specific time of how much you've sent or how much you've talked or otherwise. Again, in saving paper or otherwise. So, but specifically to that, the memory on this specific phone, if you are familiar with a CD that plays music, okay, it's about 700 megs of space. The memory on this phone specifically is about a third of that. So, and so to be able to recover or to report specifically calls, I believe, back to August of 2010 through, I believe, when it was turned over or seized, it shows consistency of text messages, with dates, consistent dates throughout, or calls throughout, or emails in and out from those dates and times.
How many phone calls did you recover totally from November the 18th from Andrea Sneiderman's phone or to her phone, regardless of to whom they were or from whom they were?
I didn't look at that, to be honest with you.
Did you ever compare that whether you did it yourself or someone else gave it to you, to the actual call records to indicate how many calls she received or made that day?
Again, I didn't look for that. I was looking specifically for what is related to this case and what I was asked specific to the phone number. You know, there could have been several calls, but since I stated previously that I didn't look for that, I wouldn't compare it as well because I didn't have that either.
Now, you indicated earlier, I think I understood you to say two different things. Earlier, you said that there could be the rollout or the oldest replaced by the newest, could be one reason for a call record or a text message to be deleted, correct?
And I was given the example specifically.
Just answer my question, yes or no, and then you can explain it if you would, please, sir.
Okay. Yes, I did explain that.
Now, would you like to explain that now?
Yes, thank you.
Please go ahead.
Sure, yes, sir. Okay, so again, as I stated, I was giving an example because this case specifically has iPhones related to it and a Blackberry. I was trying to distinguish between the two as to what an automatic rollout would be because Apple specifically sets a 100 call limit in their call history.
But in this case, you indicated that there can be a rollout or it can be purposefully deleted, correct?
And again, I stated that it depends on the manufacturer, the service provider themselves, the specific phone in that case.
Okay, well, we're talking about a Blackberry 9700.
Yes?
We're talking about AT&T Mobility. Now, does that help you figure out what manufacturer and what carrier we're talking about?
No.
Why not?
Because every phone is different. And again, I was asked to look at the contents of the image itself and comparatively review it for the specifics in this case. So I didn't review what AT&T sets their limits to for this specific phone.
So are you saying it wouldn't matter to you, or it doesn't matter because you didn't do it?
I don't understand the question.
Well, you keep saying you weren't asked to do it, but it could be up to the manufacturer, it could be up to the carrier, correct?
That's right, because there are so many phones. I mean, there's,
But you know
Hold
what...
on, Mr. Peach, let him.
Thanks.
Look it up.
again, because there are so many phones, there's so many different service providers, it would just be impossible to look at every single one or to know exactly how every single... I'm not signing the contract. It's not my phone. When I have my phone, I understand how that one works and the service that I get. When I get my bill, I understand if I have a problem, I'm going to address that specifically. So in this instance, that was not part of what I was asked to do.
But it could have been done.
Sure.
And you also indicated, although it's unlikely, I think you said you're dealing with digital equipment, anything is possible. I guess there could have been a hiccup somewhere, but you don't think that is very likely. Is that correct, essentially?
I would say that is highly unlikely. But again, in fairness, I'm saying that anything is possible.
Okay. Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of this jury when anything on that Blackberry was deleted? When it was physically deleted or when it was rolled out?
Yes. As I stated, from the time it was sent or received until it was seized, sometime in between all that time was when it was deleted.
So if I understand, when you say that, so in other words, what you're telling us is that a November the 18th message could not have been deleted prior to November the 18th.
If they received it on November 18th,
Okay.
and you're saying that it could not have been deleted in September?
Right. That's
Correct.
correct. Okay, so that's the first part of your caveat there. The second one is when it was seized, correct? S-E-I-Z-E-D?
Yes.
Seized by whom and for?
Turned over or submitted, provided
To whom?
to law enforcement for their investigation?
Okay. What would prevent law enforcement from either purposefully or accidentally deleting messages or text?
Well, in this specific case, because the phone, the Blackberry, had a password, the owner or believed did not provide that, because
Wait,
we,
let me
Hold on,
ask-
no, let me finish his answer.
Okay.
because they,
Let me finish.
John,
If you have an objection?
I object that that is non-responsive. He has no foundation for any statement that the owner did not submit the password.
All right, I sustain that objection. Go ahead. Next question, Ms. Petrie.
Okay. Do you know whether or not anybody ever asked Andrea Sneiderman for her password?
no.
Okay. So you have no knowledge as to whether or not that was ever turned over to the police or to the DA's office, do you? You know you
The
didn't.
phone or the password?
The password. You didn't get it.
Correct.
Whether or not somebody else had it and didn't turn it over to you, you do not know, correct?
I do know this. When I was asked about the Blackberry as to whether or not we could, do our forensic analysis on it and image it and examine it, the first thing was I asked for the model and whether there was a password, and they said that it is password locked and they don't have it. So I know that from that time. So when they obtained it or not, or whether they obtained it or not, I know when they had asked for our assistance on it, that was one of the requirements, and that is why we sent it up to our headquarters unit in order to, pull the actual memory and image it from that point.
When did you physically take control of it?
I don't believe that I physically took control of the Blackberry at all.
Okay. Have you ever even seen the Blackberry?
I might have seen it.
Might have. But when once whatever work was done theoretically up in Virginia, did you ever see it after that?
I don't recall seeing it at all.
It had, whether or not you saw it, seeing it had nothing to do with your analysis.
No.
You were relying on the accuracy of the image that had been provided to you. Is that correct?
We operate not only nationally, but internationally as well. Our job in our industry, we do industry standard images. We get images from all over for all types of cases. If a situation happened in California, let's say, and the victim or the subject is here and the prosecution or whatever, we may get that information directly to us. And at that point, we would never see maybe the original drive, maybe it was a business, and we're not going to shut the business down necessarily. So we go in and we are required to make an image. That image is industry standard, and it is equal to or actually having the original evidence. It's just as good, and it's been put in that effect. So whether I saw the Blackberry itself physically and held it, I had the image, which is just as good, and that's what I, again, validated the report from that was, returned.
So in essence, is what you're saying, trust me, I'm from the government?
Objection, Your Honor, as argumented.
Okay, let me rephrase. You had nothing to do with producing this image, correct?
I don't need to produce the...
Answer my question, please, yes or
Hold on
no,
for a
and
second.
explain.
You can answer the question.
Yes, sir.
Yes or no, and then you can explain.
Yes, sir. No, I had nothing to do with creating this image.
You can explain your answer if you need to.
Yes, sir. But in fact, when I get the image, I validate it to ensure that it matches, that nothing's changed from what they reported and provided to us. And when I do my analysis or review or to validate against a report, I'm going to ensure that I made no changes as well. And that is the same thing as when we provided the image over to the defense to have a copy of the image as well.
But you have to rely on what others have done before you in order to make your assessment, correct? And there's a good faith belief on your part, is what I hear you saying, that that was done correctly.
So, yes, and the way we do it, again, is we have a fingerprint, if you will, of the image, and we validate to make sure that nothing's changed from when they provided it, and again, specifically to going back to some of the images from GE, Cobb County that made images.
I don't object to anything
I understand.
about Cobb County or GE.
I understand. I'm going to sustain that portion of the objection. All right. Next question, Ms.
Okay.
Petrie.
Yes, sir. Bear with me just one moment, please, Your
Take as
Honor.
much time as you need.
Your
We're
Honor,
back on the record.
so the fingerprint that you talked about, is that, I know with computers, they sometimes call a hash function or a hash number. Is it called the same thing for a telephone?
Yes, because it's an image.
Okay. And
Yes.
it is like this long, long, long letters and numbers that theoretically are pretty much unique in all the world, just like a super duper fingerprint.
Yes.
And if it's done properly, then the item of evidence that is being examined, prior to being examined, it gives you or prior to the final analysis coming, it prints out or produces somehow that number or digit for you. Is that correct?
What happens is the difference here specifically with cell phones and PDAs, as an example, is
What's a PDA?
it's a personal device data.
Like an old Palm Pilot type?
Sure, yes, sir, thank you.
Go ahead.
Yes. Anyways, for a cell phone specifically, we have to turn them on in order to retrieve the data. So in most instances, you're at least, effectuating the boot up or when it first turns on. But in that case, we, use other techniques or standards that would protect it from sending and receiving any additional data to add to that. In this case specifically, though, the chip or the memory was pulled off and a complete image was obtained without turning it on from the time that we get it. So again, what I can say is that wherever I get it from, I can at least validate it from the time I start my analysis to say, this is what they're reporting, this is what they receive from it, and then when I start, nothing's changed, and then when I'm done, I do that as well. I validate to make sure that I have not changed anything. And we always make a copy of the image first to work with the copy, not the original, because again, it's our best evidence. We don't want to, affect that as well.
Can you tell us, sir, when you say that the chip was removed, is there a name for that type of process or procedure?
Well, and what happens is probably the best way to explain it is like a toothbrush. You have the bristles of the brush. Some of the wiring and some of the connectors are super thin like that, but they're not flexible. They are very brittle. They can break easily. That's why you see in a huge assembly line, machines that put these together. So in essence, what happens is we have to get into a clean room or a clean environment to make sure that, when we're getting into a system or what have you, that you take the board out that has the memory directly attached. It's not removable. It's not like your little memory card or something else that you can save data to and walk over to another computer and plug it in. So it's actually attached to the phone. You take the board out, you turn it over, you heat up what maintains the connection to loosen it, and then take it out. It is a very arduous or very tedious process in doing that, because again, each arm or connector, if one breaks, then it could potentially ruin the entire process.
And in this case, was that type of technology used?
Yes.
And it was used not by you, not here in Atlanta, but in another state by another agent, correct?
In our FBI headquarters, specifically the unit that has that equipment available to them, yes. And if I may make one correction, sir.
You may.
No, sir, I wasn't trying to cut you off, but it wasn't an agent that did it up there. It was another forensic and individual that is hired on the civilian side rather than an agent. I just wanted to say that.
I meant no disrespect.
No,
I thought
no, sir.
everybody was an agent, just with different jobs.
Yes, sir.
Now, the testing that was done in this case, is that what's called chip-off analysis or chip-off testing?
Well, it is similar.
For layman?
Yes, sir. It's similar. As I said, the memory is a chip, and they pull it off, and they have their own tools that they have either developed or have to be able to pull the memory off of it.
And when that type of testing is done, am I correct in my belief that you're not putting that BlackBerry back together and using it again?
It is my understanding that BlackBerry will not be put back together again. Again, because the technique of pulling off the chip itself in the first place, the connectors are so fragile that you want to limit any further damage to that. So heating it up, taking it off, putting it onto another board to actually read it, taking it off there, putting everything back into evidence, sending it back. You know, every time you heat, you know, if you notice anything, you know, it gets fragile every time you heat things up like that.
Now, the BlackBerry in question here, the BlackBerry 9700, do you, Mr. Fryman, have any personal knowledge of whose possession that BlackBerry had been in prior to the time that the agency received it?
No.
Either civilian, scientific, or law enforcement?
No.
Now, can let me back up a second. The password was determined for this BlackBerry, correct?
I believe so, yes, sir.
And there's a report indicating what it was, but if you're not the one that actually developed that, then I won't ask you anything else.
No, sir, I do not.
Okay. And just again, finally, whether or not to you or to anyone else the password had been provided, you have no information.
No, sir.
One moment, please, Your Honor.
You may take as much time as you need.
That's all I have.
All right, you can stand and stretch, ladies and gentlemen, in the jury box.
Agent Fryman?
But no, that's it, I'm just letting them stretch. You can come up to the podium. While you walk into the podium, they're doing, we're going to multitask.
Yes, sir.
I was expecting you to come to the podium.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
No problem. Now they're going to sit. Although they can listen while standing, but I wasn't giving them that. Okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead. He's with you.
All right. Agent Fryman, if you had had the BlackBerry's password, how would that have changed what you did?
And then in that instance, I could have done everything here locally 100%, and the data would have still remained the same.
Thank you, Agent.
Any recross, Mr. Petrie?
No, sir.
Lawyers, may this witness be released and excused, Ms. Subpoena?
Yes, Your Honor, from
Any
the
objections?
from this-
All right. You're free to go. Have a good day. Drive safe.
Yes, sir.
Call your next witness, please.
Your Honor, the state calls Special Agent Chad Fitzgerald.
Can his face be recorded, this person?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure we're on the same page. Ladies and gentlemen, are you good or you need a 10-minute break? Thank you for writing that response down.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Come on up, lawyers. Lawyers, would you approach, please? All right, we're back on the record, Kelly. Do not, if you could, do not record his image, his face image also, this special agent. All right. Come on up.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give this court should be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. May be seated. Please state the spelling of the record.
Chad Fitzgerald, ChadFitzgerald.
And Special Agent Fitzgerald, can you explain to the jurors, please, where you are currently employed?
I'm a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation in Atlanta, and I'm assigned to what we call the CAST unit, or the Cellular Analysis Survey Team.
How long have you been employed with the FBI in general?
Coming up on 17 years.
And how long have you been in the specific unit that you just identified for the jury?
I've been full-time officially on the unit just came up on 3 years in July, and I helped start the unit, so we were kind of an ad hoc unit for several years before that.
Explain to the jurors in a little more detail what's CAST. What is that?
Typically, we help out with federal and state prosecutions, so we travel all over the country, and we're experts on analyzing cell phone records, knowing how cell phone records work. We're also trained by all the major providers, both the engineers and the subpoena compliance.
Let me stop there. Why do you train with different cell phone providers?
Each one's different. They all have their own little way of interpreting or providing records, and it's all fairly similar, but it's just translated a little bit different.
Okay. And what training experience, beyond what you've just testified to, have you had to qualify you for the position that you're in?
In college, I got a master's in electrical engineering, specializing in communications, and since being at the FBI, because I was kind of attracted to the cellular industry, I worked a lot of cases before I got in this unit, like fugitive cases that depended a lot on phones, where I had to analyze phones, child abductions, kidnappings, robberies, and so I utilized my experience, my educational experience, to actually do actual casework, as well as I've gone on to get specialized training as part of the CAST unit and forming the CAST unit.
All right. How many agents are currently in the CAST unit?
We just certified several more about a week ago, so I think we're up to 32, give or take a few.
And can you estimate for the jurors how many investigations you've done utilizing the kind of cell phone historical data that was at issue in this case?
I would say it's in the thousands, but definitely in the high hundreds. My guess would be in the thousands. I mean, I look at phones every single day, and I did one this morning unrelated to this case.
How many times, if you have you testified in court on the topic of historical cell phone data?
I don't know the exact number, but I would guess it's definitely more than 20 times, both in state courts in different states, as well as in DeKalb, and also federally.
Have you ever been tendered as an expert in the field?
Yes, I have.
Can you approximate how many times?
Every time.
Every time. All right. Your Honor, at this time, the state would tender Agent Fitzgerald as an expert in the field of historical cell phone data interpretation.
Who's witness, Mr. Petrie?
No objection, Your Honor. Historical cell phone data interpretations?
That's what it was.
Thank you. No objection.
All right.
Special Agent Fitzgerald, can you explain for all of us? Can you explain for all of us what is it I'm talking about when I say historical cell phone data interpretation?
So a lot of times, it's a new title for me, but a lot of times, we'll be called into a case, whether it's a child abduction or a murder case or any kind of robbery case, and they we'll show them what they need to request from the cell providers, or if they already have it, we will take these records and we'll interpret it so that the investigators can know exactly what it means, what was recorded by the cell phone company. And we also do that, obviously, come to court so we can explain it to the jury what's happening with those records.
Agent Fitzgerald, did you prepare a PowerPoint presentation at my request or in preparation for your testimony today?
I did.
All right. Your Honor, I have already shown the defense, and I will hand Agent Fitzgerald first State's Exhibits number 73 through 80. And
going to ask if you can take a look at that and see if you recognize State's Exhibits number 73 through 80.
Yes.
How is it that you recognize those exhibits?
I created it.
And without telling me the content of them, can you tell me generally what it was, the information that you were conveying?
So it's just it's partial of the whole presentation that I did, just explaining, number one, in general, just showing a few elements of the cellular network, as well as a sample of what the records look like, and explaining those, and also explaining how you can use those records to determine the general geographic area of a cell phone.
And by general geographic area, can you explain to the jurors just a little bit now what you mean by that?
So every cell provider, for every subscriber, it's not just for law enforcement or for the courts, it's every subscriber so that they can keep the quality of the call and know how much to bill you in the end, because bottom line is they need to make money. They need to know generally where your phone is. So they need to be able to deliver the call to you when a call comes in, as well as when you request to make a call. They need to know generally where you are so they can connect your call to whoever you're trying to dial. There's a record of that. So based on that record, it shows which tower and sector was utilized when you received or made that call or text. And we're looking at those records, and we can determine where that tower and sector are located within their network in the United States.
Your Honor, may I push the witness?
You may.
Agent Fitzgerald, I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibits number 81 through 91, and I'm going to ask you to take a look at those and see if you recognize those State's Exhibits.
Yes, I do.
What are they?
Ms. Cross, I'm not sure I got a chance to look at those yet. You showed me
That's what I handed you a little earlier. I'm happy to, Your Honor, may I push the witness again?
You may.
I just look at those
If
real
you could
briefly.
retrieve those so Mr. Petrie can take a look at those also.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Not a problem.
Stay with us.
Any objection, Mr. Petrie?
No, sir, they just didn't have numbers earlier. I wasn't sure what those were. I have no objection.
All right. You may continue. You may approach. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Excuse me.
And at this time, the State would move to admit State's Exhibit number 73 through 91 into evidence.
Is that 91?
91, Your Honor.
73 through 91. Mr. Petrie, any objections?
I would like, Your Honor, for them to be identified for the record as to what they are, since there's so many of them.
Oh, you may. I was just asking if you have any objection.
I have no objection to them, I think, once we know what they are.
Oh, yeah. You ought to know what they are also.
Well, all right.
All right. I thought you had showed. Is that what you just showed him?
She showed them to me, Your Honor, but they weren't numbered at the time she showed them to me, so I need to know which number goes with which one.
If you could, just go through each one so he can. That's fine.
I certainly will. Thank you, Your Honor. Agent Fitzgerald, would you look at the first State's Exhibit, please? I believe it's State's Exhibit number 73.
Yes.
Your Honor, may I ask Mr. Petrie, may I confer with Mr. Petrie for one moment?
No, you may ask this question because y'all conferred already.
Okay, all right. Agent Fitzgerald, can you identify State's Exhibit number 73 for us, please?
Yes, it's just a picture of that I took of a fairly standard cell tower.
And is that part of the PowerPoint presentation you prepared for your testimony today?
It is?
And would State's Exhibit number 73 assist you in explaining to the jury the basic mechanism of a cell phone tower, how it works, things like that?
I hope so. That's the point, yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the State will move State's Exhibit number 73 into evidence.
Any objection, Mr. Petrie?
No, sir, and Your Honor, to speed things up, I have no objection to these things once I know what number goes with what exhibit. So if we could just make sure he tells us what number goes with what exhibit, I have no further objections other than I don't know where they fall into numbers.
I intend to.
I won't respond to that, Ms. Petrie. What I'm going to do, though, if it's easier, you can retrieve those items, let Mr. Petrie look at them to see the numbers, if that will assist Ms. Petrie.
That's fine.
All right.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So just retrieve all of them. That's 73 through 91.
73 through 91.
Put them in your hand and walk them across the room.
I intend to do that.
All right. And would you hand him the entire packet
Gently.
gently?